Joining me on the show today, we have Terry Walsh, SA Executive Director for the Urban Development Institute of Australia, which is all about planning. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Kerry.
So recently some articles around about high-rise in South Australia. How are South Australians feeling about multi-storey buildings? Are we going to be the Gold Coast?
We won't be the Gold Coast. I don't think we'll ever be the Gold Coast, Kerry. But clearly we are looking at change in the next decade or so, with Adelaide really seeking a resolution to the issue of whether you grow out or whether you grow up. And I think the answer is, in a planning perspective, that we're likely to have some areas where we'll increase our heights, but we'll still retain those wonderful character areas that depict Adelaide so well. And we'll still have some greenfield or outer fringe suburbs which create their own little nestle suburbs of their own right, with shopping areas and schools so that people can be relatively close to their employment. But certainly across some of those major roads, Fullerton Road, Greenhill Road, Unley Road, we are likely to get some higher rise buildings.
So how has the community reacted to that? Has there been some consultation around this?
Lots of consultation, and that's therapeutic and informative.
And part of the change process.
And part of the change process. And it is important to have, because it's important for people to feel the opportunity to express their view. The difficulty with all of us is that we're talking about planning for the next decade or two. And most of us feel that any suggestions are related to our current way of living, which most of us don't wish to disturb. So that's a difficulty with planners. However, it is inevitable that Adelaide will grow. We hope South Australia will grow as well, because Adelaide does grow. And to do that, we need to plan. And we need to plan so that the higher density areas are in those places which can most cater for it.
So how does South Australia become more attractive to people if you have a high density style of living?
Well, it is an enigma for some people who have not experienced high density living. The view of the so-called quarter acre block has already gone. We only have to go to the more recent suburbs like Mawson Lakes and Lightsview, where there is higher density than most people would have ever recalled seeing. And yet there are houses there mixed between some which sell for about $300,000, adjacent to those which sell for $1 million, and they all nestle in very comfortably.
And obviously you're talking about longer term planning and for population. Has there been a relationship between the two? We expect population to grow to this, therefore we need X?
Yeah. It's a very important thing. We need population, and certainly our industry view is, and it's my personal view, that population is going to grow inevitably. We, at the moment in South Australia, have a population growth rate of about 1%. Together with Tasmania, we're the slowest growing part of the nation. Western Australia is growing at 5 times our rate at the moment. And that has implications for the GST allocation. It has implications for where the federal budget, like last night's budget would have highlighted, where those big projects are going to go. It has implications for the age profile of South Australians. Recently we've had stats which show about 1.7 working people in South Australia support all the others.
That's pretty scary.
It's very scary. Very scary. For the next 2 decades we're going to get closer to 1 working person for every other person who's not working. So the question then is, we need resources, we need growth in the state, so as to have working people who pay taxes, who can sustain the services that we've all become accustomed to, Kerry.
So we're still talking about the mining sector being a big boom for us. Where do people who do the fly in, fly out want to live?
I think the mining exploration sector was the one that had most of the people. We are now going to that next phase where we'll have mining production, and in terms of revenue to the state and the country, that's going to be more significant. But in terms of the people involved, that's going to be dropping away quite dramatically. So the mining industry, relative to construction and human services, is a much lower employer. Fly in, fly out, our industry, me personally, don't favour that. I can see why those who are involved in working can fancy that. They have 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or whatever combination exists. And I can understand that. But in terms of generating wealth for those communities to become something significant and become entities of their own, it doesn't help our community to grow. So the mining industry is one part. Health is going to increase 4-fold. Education is going to increase 3-fold. Other human services
Well, they're
are going to
exportable,
increase.
aren't they?
They're exportable as well, but they also employ a lot. So South Australia's got to look at attracting people who've got those skills, Kerry, whether it be from overseas or interstate, and we actually have to plan for it. It just doesn't happen.
Oh,
if we don't do it, as I said, those numbers, 1.7 working people for every one person on other benefits, that's going to drop and make life very difficult. So we have to plan for the new sort of living. And hopefully we're planning for people in that next generation who have aspirations to live a little differently to what we did in the past 2 decades. Hence the higher density, more apartments, more open space, more public spaces that are used by communal groups. That's going to be seen as more attractive for South Australia, as we're finding in other states.
Terry, talk to me about how it's actually going to look, what the style of them will be, because often we think these developers come there with the developments of the 70s and then the 80s. And what concept around
we hope there's no cream brick that, that has imitation balconies. That's, I think, most of us, the sort of building that we recognise all too easily, and we kind of say, well, what's going to happen with those over the next 2 decades? I think what we'll see are pockets of higher density where we have smaller allotments for some people who prefer that. We'll have allotments where we'll have a combination of spaces in them. We won't see towers. I can't see South Australia's population in the next 5 decades requiring that. We will see areas of higher rise than we've got. In other words, it'll be higher than 2 levels. And certainly I would argue that Fullerton Road, Greenhill Road are perfect frames to outstanding public places. That if they were framed well by beautiful, slightly higher rise buildings, would both attract people to live there and complement.
Sounds fantastic. That's great information. Love to keep talking, but we need to go to Going, Going, Gone. We'll be back shortly.